Welcome to the Conscious Pod, the go-to podcast for law firms looking to elevate their digital marketing strategies. I'm Laura Morris, Social Media Manager at Conscious, and in today's episode we're diving into the world of digital PR with our Head of Digital PR, Joanna Cunningham. We covered everything from the key differences between traditional and digital PR to expert tips on crafting successful campaigns and the future of PR. Thanks for joining us today, Joanna, to talk all things digital PR. I know that this is a topic that a lot of law firms are keen to learn more about, so I'm really excited to get into it. So just to start, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your role at Conscious and how you got into digital PR?
So yeah, I've been with Conscious for just over 5 years now, and I started off as just on my own, and the team has kind of grown since then, and we've taken on more PR clients, and I think now we have a real good understanding of what works, not just in PR, but specifically for law firms and their specific services as well. So it's been a proper journey, actually, 5 years, but it's been great, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is going to be a really popular one, actually. Lots and lots to talk about. And as you say, you've learned so much over the years, so
Yeah,
probably too much to cover in one session. But yeah, we'll try we'll try our best.
yeah.
So I'm going to start with it might be an obvious question to some, but can you just explain the difference between traditional and digital PR, please?
Yeah, definitely. I think this is actually a really good one to start with, especially for law firms, because I think, law firms, they can see PR as quite an offline thing a lot of the
Mhm.
time, newspapers and TV and radio. And whilst that does have its place, we're in a world where online presence is really everything.
Mhm.
And digital PR is the sort of other side of things that is more online platforms like websites and blogs and social media and things like that. And I think not only is that great for law firms because it gives them the opportunity to appear online in the search engines and it supports an SEO strategy, but for the digital marketers out there it does offer more measurable results
Mhm.
than the traditional options, really. And it can also be free. Like, the thing with digital PR is a lot of the time we try to stick with earned media rather than paid media. And I
Mhm.
think traditional PR is often more kind of advertorials and that kind of thing, which is
Yeah.
more paid. So it kind of works, both work for a good strategy, but that's where we come in, the digital PR side.
Yeah, I think getting those measurable results, I think especially when, we're all struggling for time, we want to get the most out of marketing budgets and to get actual, tangible results and ROI from your efforts is a
Mm.
plus. So yeah,
Yeah,
digital PR does lend more to that. Um,
100%.
so why do you think digital PR is important for law firms in particular?
Yeah, I mean, I touched on it a little bit just now, but I think the first thing is that it's rarely done. So for law firms, it really does set you apart from other people. But on our side of things, because at Conscious, we focus a lot on SEO, it does support an SEO strategy. Link building is a term we use often in SEO, and this is essentially the act of getting other websites to link to your website. And that could be from, like I said, like online platforms like websites and blogs, but some of the more valuable links can come from news websites.
Mhm.
So obviously the kind of prime spot would be the BBC or the Times or the
Yeah.
Telegraph, but those are very aspirational, and you can just get links using digital PR. And honestly, digital PR is the only way to achieve those links,
Mhm.
is yeah, to those local papers that are local to you and your law firm, or business national publications and law national publications like Law News, Law Net, all
Mhm.
of those. So that just gives you an in there. And then also, I think having that presence online does build trust, not only with potential clients,
Mhm.
but also with journalists. And the more you can build that portfolio and build that brand image in the news, the more likely journalists will call upon you to comment. And then it's a kind of ever spinning wheel, then I would
Mhm.
say.
Yeah. That's really interesting because I had no idea that digital PR is something that law firms rarely do. I just assumed, I think because we have this digital PR service, it's great. I just assumed that everybody was doing it. But yeah, that's really
Yeah,
interesting. But
you'd
yeah,
be surprised. Yeah, I
yeah.
have a look at the backlink portfolios of law firms as part of my work,
Mhm.
and a lot of the time, most law firms just don't have that consistent link building strategy going on in the background. So anyone who's doing that is setting themselves apart from the rest for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that all law firms want to do.
It
So
really is. Yeah, it's very competitive out there.
yeah. So, from your experience, what do you think are the key components for a strong digital PR strategy for law firms? What sort of things should they be thinking about?
Yeah, so back to SEO again. I will be going on about that, but it really is. They are symbiotic. But you really need an SEO foundation. I would say what we often advise, I suppose, is don't start building links until you have a website that works.
Mhm.
So that could be offsite SEO, so the back end of the website and making sure
Mhm.
that's all good. I wouldn't say that I know the ins and outs of that so much because that's not my
No.
expertise. But and then obviously the on-site SEO, so that's making sure that the service pages are doing the right things and what they need to keep the audience there and to maintain, with all the right keywords and everything like that.
Mhm.
I'm very oversimplifying it here, but that's really a good place to start. And then once you've got that, you can start building those links via digital PR.
Yeah, no, but I think that is really interesting to know because if law firms are out there looking for digital PR but they haven't got such a great website, then maybe they need to be looking for both SEO services and PR services at the same time, or maybe SEO
Mm,
services before and then PR services after. Like, it's good to have the knowledge that those really go hand in hand and that
yeah,
you need to have one set in stone before the other.
yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. But then I suppose on the flip side, it does depend on what the goals are.
Mm.
Because we've had a few occasions where people will come to us and say they're really just looking to build their brand image rather than their SEO. And
Yeah.
so their main goals are not to use digital PR to build links, but
Mhm.
to build this expert kind of portfolio for their
Mm.
fee earners and things like that.
Yeah.
So I suppose, yeah, it does depend on the goal, but if you're looking for it to support an SEO strategy, then you really do need those foundations. But on the flip side, you don't always need that if that's not your end game.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, and then other than that, some other key components of a strong digital PR strategy would be leveraging the experts that you have in-house.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things journalists are always looking for is expert commentary on current topics to do
Mhm.
to do with any law. And the great thing about being a law firm is you have those people on hand. And so if you can leverage those people and get them involved and explain to them the importance of digital PR and getting their names out there,
Yeah.
then I think that's just something that law firms should really consider as a starting point for any digital PR. And then with that comes being quick at turning stories around and reacting quickly. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges actually is getting the fee earners on board with providing expert commentary and then getting their okay for commentary quickly and with the news cycle, I suppose.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's such an important element because I know sometimes it is a struggle to get people involved in any sort of marketing activity.
Of
So,
course, yeah.
and especially when they're putting their name to it, I suppose it's a
It's
bit,
yeah, it's even more important when
yeah.
it comes to PR because we'll always send a story off with a name attached
Mhm.
to it. And
Yeah.
so anything that we send to the clients needs to be okayed, within ideally 24 hours, if not before, so that we can get it out. It does depend on the type of story and
Mhm.
the urgency, but
Yeah.
yeah, it really helps to have that good relationship with the clients where they understand the importance of it and can help us out there.
Okay, great. So, what are the main types of digital PR campaigns that law firms can try? And are there sort of any pros and cons with these?
So we often just put our kind of campaigns into three buckets.
Hmm.
So there's the reactive side of things. So that would be reacting to current stories that are happening in the news already, or reacting to journalists reaching out for comment.
Yeah.
So places like Journo Request, which is a hashtag on X, is a
Hmm.
place to head for that sort of thing. So what journalists will do is they'll say, "Oh, I'm writing a story about this. Can I get any law firms to comment?" And there are other platforms for that as well, but I won't go too much into detail about that now because we'll run out of time.
Yeah.
but um, but yeah, there are a few platforms like that, and those give you the opportunity to just slide into the DMs of the journalist, basically.
Mhm.
Or, the reactive, so something's just broken in the news and you have a fresh new take to add to that.
Mhm.
And actually, I would emphasize that as well. You can't just go in and react in the same way as everybody else is going to react.
Mhm.
You have to be reacting with something new. I think there's this misconception that you can just kind of go to a journalist that's written about a topic and be like, "Oh, like I've got this to say about this."
Yeah.
You really can't go to journalists with that, especially if they've already covered the story, because
Yeah.
are they going to go back and edit their article that's already published? Probably not.
Yeah.
You need to be providing them with a whole new angle for them to kind of follow up on the previous story.
Yeah. And what exactly extra are you going to add at this point when it's, they've
Exactly,
probably already
exactly.
got several people at that point who have given their opinion and
It
extra
precisely,
insight.
yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, they've already gone to the people that they would, yeah, they've already got their expert commentary. So,
Mhm.
and a lot of the time, these big journalists, they won't publish a story until they have those comments because it's a lot more trustworthy that way.
Yeah.
So their article is done at that point of publication. There's no reason why they would go back and edit it and add your commentary in. So always go with a new, fresh take. And then expert commentary is our other one, which kind of goes hand in hand with that. But this is our sort of definition of that is where you kind of create stories yourself as an expert. So
Mhm.
what we would kind of use to do this is there are loads of ways, but a good example of where you could do this is, say there's a family law change happening and you're a family lawyer. So for example, no fault divorce, that changed a few years ago,
Yeah.
and that would have been a really good opportunity to provide expert commentary. So you can write up a great press release about why, people should be looking out for this law and what it means for people, what it means for the industry. You can provide that commentary and jump on it before anyone else does, really.
Mhm.
And you can do that with not just law changes, but also trends and awareness days. I mean, we've even done it with ChatGPT for a client before. Actually, I think we did it for two clients for separate stories. But when ChatGPT came out back in 2023 February, we jumped on that pretty soon because we kind of thought everyone's talking about this. So what's our law in on this?
Yeah.
And we spun it to our, well, I don't want to say spin because that's not what we did.
No.
We crafted a story that fit that theme and that topic. So that's a great way of getting covered in the news.
Mhm.
And then our final way, which is my favorite, is data led. This is using data to craft stories. So this could be publicly available data like the ONS, it could be internal data that you have
Mhm.
collected yourself, it could be using a survey provider to collect data for you. Original data is the best here because it provides new, fresh stories, but by all means, using data that's publicly available is a really good way of creating stories and angles that are kind of interesting or shocking or locally focused, especially if the data's local. There's so much you can do with data.
Mhm. Okay, great. So I wonder if you can just explain a little bit more about those three different types of campaigns and why each of them is valuable.
Yeah, okay. Reactive, that's the first one I mentioned,
Hmm.
where you react to current stories and get respond to journalist requests as well.
Hmm.
And I think, as you might imagine, that's just one of the quickest ways to generate coverage,
Yeah.
especially if a law firm is strapped for time, because those sorts of places are really easy to monitor. So I mentioned the hashtag journal request on X, but there is also Quoted, which is QWOTED. That's just one example of many where you can set your sort of what you're looking for, like if you're a law firm, what topics you want to talk about, and
Mhm.
you will get journalist requests straight into your inbox, your email inbox, if you set everything up correctly. And so that's a great way of getting those journalist requests into your vision, but not having to really try that hard and
Mm.
not having to invest loads of time. And obviously, I do understand that law firms are often strapped for time,
Yeah.
especially if you're a marketer within a law firm. That is just one of the many things that is not on the top of your list.
Hmm.
But if you can just get those emails sent to you, then yeah, it's just a great way to get it into your vision. Um,
Do you find that the journalists are quite quick to respond? I'm just thinking like what is a sort of time frame that law firms should aim to be getting like reactive PR pieces out in the world, and like how quickly
mm,
should they expect a response from journalists or
yeah,
at
is it?
all?
Yeah, no, and you saying or at all is kind of what I was going to go with is
Oh yeah.
more often than not, you are not going to receive any responses from journalists, even if they cover your story.
Yeah.
We will send off. Do you know what? I could probably count on one hand the amount of responses that we've had when we send out a comment or a story.
Mhm.
Even if we get coverage, we still won't receive that. So I think you can't really expect that with reactive and journalists requesting for commentary. It's a little bit different because
Yeah.
they
Mhm.
have put that feeler out there and it's not you approaching them with a story.
Mhm.
So they're looking for someone and you're potentially the person for them. But we have had a lot of situations where we've emailed with a response and they haven't responded, whether that be because they've already got their commenter or they miss the email amongst their many, many emails, or, there could be a number of reasons why a journalist doesn't respond. I do find that even if we do email them about a journal request, more often than not, they don't reply, which
Mhm.
is a shame. But then you do get the odd time that they do, so it is worth putting in
Yeah.
that effort.
And I guess making it as easy as possible, like you say, with these tools, so that you don't have to like do lots of legwork to then get nothing back from it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I know that's a good point because if you're doing all that legwork, you do want to see results, but really it's a
Yeah.
case of just quickly getting something together in half an hour and sending it
Yeah.
off and just kind of hoping for the best, really.
Yeah. Okay, so talk to me a bit more about the expert commentary type campaigns.
Okay, yeah. So I already mentioned, upcoming law changes, awareness days, and just current topics of conversation. Those are the sorts of things that you might comment on. And I think what's just important, and I mentioned it before, but you just want to be leveraging the experts that you have
Yeah.
and also the content as well. I think that is a really good way to repurpose content. So say,
Yeah.
for example, you've got the finger on the pulse as a marketer in a law firm, or even just as a law firm without marketers. You know what's coming in the law and you know what's ahead. You
Mhm.
might have a piece of content on your website that already talks about anything that's going to happen, like a law change.
Mhm.
That's a really good opportunity to use that content and repurpose it.
Yeah.
Um, so we would always recommend to provide a journalist with somewhere to link to.
Mhm.
And as you can imagine, I mentioned before about the SEO benefit of link building. When we send out a press release, we always, within that press release, will link to a landing page on the client's website.
Mhm.
And if you already have a piece of content that talks about an upcoming law change and you want to send out a press release about that topic and what it means for businesses and employees, then that's a perfect way to repurpose that content and use that content to write a press release and
Mhm.
link to it and all that stuff. I think the main thing just really is that you need to be providing something new and current, like I mentioned
Yeah.
before. Always provide something new and a new angle. Don't just regurgitate what's already out there. You
Mhm.
just need to be providing value at every level.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's the same across most marketing things. Is
Yeah, yeah.
like, if you're not providing value, then what is the point, essentially?
Yeah,
People
exactly. And I
aren't going to
think
be interested.
for sure, with journalists, there is this misconception that, they're really hard to please and they're really, difficult to get, coverage from them. In reality, yeah, it is, but they're supposed to have a symbiotic relationship with PRs
Hmm.
and with people who are trying to provide them with useful content. But I think you've got to see it like that when you're approaching them, that they're not just going to cover your story because you know them and you have a connection with them, for starters, but equally, they might cover your story if it's valuable, even if you don't have that connection with them.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, with data-led campaigns, how do they help law firms get more media coverage?
Okay, yeah. I mean, like I said, this is my favorite, but and I mentioned the types of data that you could use, but I think one that would be worth focusing on is external data, well, what we call external data, which is using data that's already out there.
Hmm.
So that could be, like I said, the ONS. And I think there's this misconception that because the data is publicly available, it's not interesting.
Mm.
Anyone can look at it. But the reality is that most people don't really know how to interpret data. And also, are they really going, is the general public going to go to the ONS and have a look at the data? It's unlikely. So we make use of newly released data to craft stories because it creates buzz around, around the topic,
Hmm.
and it also helps present the data in a digestible way that appeals to journalists and their audience.
Yeah.
I think it would be a good point to maybe provide an example of that, because I think speaking about data is quite overwhelming for people, but
Mm.
maybe an example would be there's data out there on house prices, and you are a Birmingham law firm and you want to see how the house prices in Birmingham compare over the years. So, have house prices increased or decreased? What's affordability like generally, and how does Birmingham compare to the rest of the UK
Yeah.
over time? That's a really good way to use data, because what you're doing is you're telling a story. You are a Birmingham law firm, you're isolating the Birmingham data and figuring out how it compares to other places and to itself.
Hmm.
And then you're writing that up in a story and you're sending it to Birmingham newspapers.
Hmm.
So you're ticking all the boxes there, because you're saying, you know, why are we sending this to you? Well, it's relevant data to you because you work and write about Birmingham.
Hmm.
Um, and you're providing a story, like a new story that no one else has really talked about. So yeah, that's why data to me is just the most useful tool that goes unused, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, and that is really interesting because I actually think that with local stuff, if I ever see a story that's about Bristol, for example, I'm always clicking on it because I'm like, oh,
What's
what,
new? Yeah.
yeah, what's happening in my neighborhood? So I think, yeah, like people are really interested in what's happening
Yeah.
like in their local community, and
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, it's shocking that like it's not used more often.
Yeah,
Checking that
definitely. And
local data.
yeah, for sure. And like, you'd always see the top 10 stories of, Cornwall in the top 10 for this, that, and the other.
Yeah,
And that is more often than not, those stories are ones that PRs have put together and sent.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
think once you know what to look for, you can really spot them in the local papers. But you can also use those top 10, stories to approach nationals as well. So
Mhm.
that's why data is super important, and actually a really untapped resource for lawyers, especially, is for law firms even, is internal data sets that they might have, because
Yeah.
that is original data
Mhm.
that no one else has, and
Yeah.
it tells a story about what people are looking for in the legal sector, and what family law clients are looking at specifically, and what they're paying for, and what they're doing, and how how their behavior is. And that
Yeah.
could really speak to law journalists and family journalists, all sorts.
Hmm. And in terms of because I know you mentioned surveys before as well.
Mm.
Is there a good tool that law firms can use to help them collect or conduct these surveys? Because I know, if you're looking to do sort of grand scale surveys, get it out to, it might be they want to do it nationally. Is there a tool
Mm.
that they can use to or a person that will do that for them?
Yeah, I wouldn't say a tool, and I've had a little look myself, obviously, because The thing with what we have done in the past, which is use survey companies,
Mm.
and they are expensive.
Okay.
It's an yeah, it's an investment is all I'll say. And really, when you get that original data, if you do it in a smart way and you ask smart questions, you can reap the benefits of that survey for, campaigns and campaigns to come.
Yeah.
So I think in the past, you probably, I mean, it might have changed, but you'll probably be paying no less than 2.5, 3K for a survey, depending on the requirements.
Okay.
But yeah, I've had a look to see if there are any tools for polling and things like that. But I think the
Mhm.
problem with that is you're not really going to be able to get those polls out to an audience, a large audience as well, because you want to
Yeah.
be reaching out to at least 1,000 people with that data, just so that it is a representation of the pool of people.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
definitely.
it's a bit tricky, and I think people might think that social media would be good for that, but you're only really reaching out to your
Yeah.
direct sort of pool of influence, I suppose, and that's pretty skewed. It's not a
Yeah.
good representation of society and the
No,
general public.
no, because not everybody would be on, not every age group is going to be on social media, and not
Yeah.
every, there's lots of different factors, and you'd have to probably pay for that as well on social media, I imagine, because
Probably,
yeah,
yeah. I think the
organic
good thing
just isn't
about
cut it anymore.
exactly, it really doesn't. The survey companies, they do a proper sweep of the pool that you're looking at. So you can even specify like, oh, we want to speak to office workers in the UK. And they'll do like a screening of all of them at the beginning to just make sure that the pool is as diverse as possible.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds really good. So coming back to journalists, how can law firms find relevant media opportunities and journalists to connect with? So how are they finding them?
Mm.
What are the effective ways to pitch stories to journalists?
Yeah. Well, obviously, I mentioned Joanna Request Unquoted and things like
Mm.
that. So, like I say, I think that's a great place to start at the beginning of your PR journey, I suppose.
Yeah.
We use Roxil. So, I think obviously because we're doing PR at a grander scale than most law firms might be in-house, this is a database for journalists.
Hmm.
But I do think that you can do this manually. Like if you have a story that you want to reach out to journalists with,
Hmm.
and you know like who you want to reach, then you can just create that manually by using Google or AI research tools.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I say, I think as long as you have an angle, something new to say, then you can just manually select who you want to reach out to and just email them personally.
Hmm. But as we say, maybe don't expect don't expect to reply
Don't
straight
expect to
away.
reply, but maybe just monitor the news and make sure that you're keeping an eye out to see if they
Yeah.
did cover your news.
Yeah. But it's good that like obviously we have these automated tools as well. So they're going to take, if you don't have the time to manually do it, they're going to take some of the legwork out for,
Yeah,
finding the opportunities as well.
definitely. Yeah, I think they're ever growing, ever changing these AI tools. So worth
Yeah.
taking a look and seeing if they can help you out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know about a few of these myself as I at Conscious Solutions. But can you share an example of a successful digital PR campaign that you have executed for a law firm?
Sure. I think the most recent one that comes to mind is one we did for a conveyancing solicitor of ours that we've got very regular. We've been doing PR for them for years now, so we really
Mhm.
understand what they're after. And this is actually a campaign we do annually for them, and it's just a predictions campaign for the year ahead.
Mhm.
So in December of any year, we'll say, we'll collect some expert commentary from them about what their predictions are for the property market moving into the new year.
Mhm.
And so we did this for them moving into 2025. In December, we put this campaign together, which reached out to legal journalists, property journalists, all that, all those kinds of angles.
Mhm.
And we reached out to them with the predictions that we expected to happen. And so with that, we wrote up a landing page on the client's site which covered all our predictions.
Mhm.
And we then siphoned off each theme prediction into actionable press releases that we could reach out to the relevant journalists with. And in the end, this got 9 pieces of coverage, all with links actually, which was great
Mhm.
because a lot of the time they won't link, they'll just do a brand mentions.
Yeah.
And I think some of the coverage we got was in Money Week, in MSN, Express, IFA magazine. So yeah, just a little peek into the sorts of
Yeah.
campaigns that we do on a regular basis.
That's amazing though, and it just goes to show that there is a lot of power in these PR pieces when they're
Mhm.
done right.
For
Um,
sure, yeah,
yeah.
definitely. Yeah, I think it is just worth mentioning that you can't just reach out with them to journalists and say, "Oh, we have a press release or we have a landing page or
Mm,
we have an expert commentary." You basically just need to be delivering everything to them on a platter.
yeah.
So, like I say, you write this predictions landing page and say there's a few themes there. Like one might be first time buyer predictions and one might be new build property predictions, one might be sustainable property, whatever it might be. You
Mm,
can create a press release about each of those topics and reach out to relevant journalists about that specific topic to
mhm.
get the best chance of coverage.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is it's a lot of work.
It is, yeah, unfortunately, but it is as you can see, it does get
Yeah.
results, which is
Oh yeah,
great.
definitely worth the effort. Yeah.
For sure, yeah.
And it kind of leads me into my next question, which is about common mistakes that you've seen. So, what kind of things that should law firms avoid doing when they're looking to start in digital PR?
Yeah, I think I've mentioned it previously, but I think the main thing would be conflating digital PR with media relations
Hmm.
and just this idea that you've got to have a black book of journalists. And yeah, we use Roxhill, like I mentioned, which is a database of journalists, but we're not on a first-line basis with many of them. You're unlikely to have an ongoing relationship with them in this digital world
Yeah.
because, like I say, you just need to be providing them with value at every stage. So yeah, there is this idea that if you don't have this black book of journalists, then you can't get coverage.
Hmm.
But I've just seen in the past law firms approaching these people that they know and are on a first name basis with them and are wondering why they're not getting coverage because they know them,
Mm.
but you can't really just go up to a journalist, whether it be email or calling, and say, "Oh, I thought we could do a story about this. What do you think? I can comment."
Yeah.
It doesn't really work like that. You have to
No.
hand them everything on a platter and
Yeah.
say, here's the story, here's a press release, here's everything you need, and this is why it's interesting, this is why you should cover it now. So yeah, it's just this myth, I think.
Yeah. You've got to provide the value, which, as we said before, if there's no value in it, then you're not going to see the success from it.
Exactly.
You're just another voice in
Yeah,
in
in the many, and yeah, you can imagine
yeah,
how many emails they get, these
exactly.
journalists.
Yeah, exactly. Which is, why they probably don't ever respond. Um,
Exactly, and like I think rule number one is don't call them these days. So
oh no, that's no, nobody wants to
don't
call
no
these.
nobody wants that. Don't call the journalist, and I've
Don't
I've
call
made
me.
that mistake, and I will not be doing that again.
Oh no. Um, in terms of looking at the success of a digital PR campaign, how do you measure that, and how long does it typically take to see results from your digital PR efforts?
Well, obviously, I mentioned that you probably won't get a journalist responding to you,
No.
even if they cover it. So you do need to be keeping abreast of what's going on in the news and whether your story's been covered or not. I often like to set up alerts. So I have Google Alerts set up for the client names that we do PR for. There's also a similar sort of thing called Talkwalker, and that's also alerts that I set up. And I think Google Alerts and Talkwalker combined pretty much catch most instances of mentions of clients. And then I do also just browse Google News as well, which is a great place to look just in case, see if there's any coverage there. And then obviously on our side of things, we do have Google Analytics, which can take a look at where traffic is coming from. And occasionally you do get traffic coming from those bigger news sites, which is great. It just means that the links are creating referrals, which is quite rare, actually, I will say, but it does happen. So it's worth just keeping abreast of all that.
Mhm.
And then what did you ask? How long does it take to see results?
Mhm.
So I would say you more often than not get immediate results with coverage. So as in you'll send out a story, and if someone is interested, you'll pretty much see coverage with that story within like the hour, like maybe not the hour, but within 24 hours, I would say. But it can be anywhere between kind of 24 hours to a week or 2 weeks until you see
Mhm.
coverage.
Yeah.
Um, but one thing that's worth noting is any campaign that you do can reap rewards later
Mhm.
because if you're sending regular useful press releases to a journalist, then you're in their mind's eye for commentary later, so you might actually end up with an email from a journalist saying, oh, you helped provide comment for this story in the past, can you help us out with this topic? So it's just a long-term relationship that's being built there with regular campaigns targeting the right people.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's good that you can see short and long-term results from it. So, because I imagine it's hard for marketing teams to get buy-in for certain projects from, leadership. And so having that literally immediate results is a bonus because then it's going to encourage, further uptake of digital PR in the future and more budget going towards that if they're seeing some success from it. So, I
Mm,
think that's having
no,
that proof of, that it's working is
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's gold dust.
yeah. So, looking out to the future now, what are the emerging digital PR trends in 2025 and beyond
hmm
that law firms should be aware of?
hmm Well, I mean, it's probably not going to surprise anyone that I will say AI.
Yeah.
I think
Everywhere.
that yeah, it can just be used for a lot of the tasks that I've mentioned. So obviously, we know that data is a big thing in PR now, and using AI to sort through data and find the patterns that we're looking for could be a really good use of time because it can be very time intensive looking at data, and a lot of people don't have data literacy, so it just gives you that in there with doing those data-led campaigns but not having to trawl through crazy amounts of data to get there. But then also, the classic boosting productivity, so it can help with the basic admin side of things. So one thing which we are really looking to explore is whether it can monitor the news for us. So obviously I mentioned Journo Request and Quoted, but what would be great is having a summary of what's going on in the news about a specific topic.
Mhm.
So like a property or family, and getting all of that in on your doorstep so that you don't have to do that manually. And then the brainstorming side of things, campaign ideas and predicting trends. So that can really be used for so much stuff. But I think on the flip side, with the introduction of AI and really seeing that pervade in many industries, people are seeking human centric stories and content. And I think that can't be ignored. So you'll notice that when I spoke about AI, I didn't mention anything about content. And I think it stands that content should be written by people when it comes to PR. It really should.
We don't want
Um,
any more in today's fast-paced digital
Oh
world.
my gosh. Yeah, no, I saw that written on something today and I thought, no. I think it can be used for rewording things. So obviously you'll know
Yeah.
that I mentioned having a kind of landing page and writing taking a specific part of that landing page and crafting it into a story press release.
Mm.
But using that to reword and recraft a press release for the same story but a different angle, or for a different same story but a different location. I can see the value in that because if you've already put in the groundwork to write the template version,
Yeah.
then rewording it to suit a different theme or a different location could be a good use of time.
Yeah.
But all discretion advised, of course, with any of this sort of thing, and it's good to keep abreast of what's leaving our desks and going to journalist laps.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know there aren't any. Well, I know there are tools that supposedly detect AI, aren't there? But AI content, but I don't know if they're that great yet. But it's only
Mm,
a matter of time, I suppose, before the tools will improve and
yeah,
people start rejecting things because they're written by AI. And
yeah,
like you say, it's all about, people don't want to speak to robots. We want
no,
to people. So, and we
exactly.
read what people have written.
Exactly, yeah. It's a minefield. It really, really is.
Yeah.
But it's like you say, there are some telltale signs. But then saying that, we probably only know that because we're marketers. So maybe the
Yeah.
general public aren't looking at that too much. But yeah, I do think it is worth remembering that as the AI tools develop at this rapid rate, so too will the AI detection tools.
Yeah.
No doubt, no
Yeah.
doubt.
And like, it's only been a couple of years really, hasn't it, since, generative AI has come about. And
Mm.
it's so much has happened in that short few
I
years.
know it is scarily,
So
just
fast. It's just,
intuitive, and
yeah.
it's developed so much in terms of its capabilities. And as marketers, you're always keeping abreast of what's changing in AI and how it's delivering the goods basically.
Yeah.
And it's definitely doing more than it did even 6 months ago.
And I just don't think we're going to when it's difficult to keep up with it. And who knows what's going to happen in 2 years' time with AI,
Mm,
and
I know.
how people are going to be interacting with it. So yeah, it's definitely it's interesting, in terms of productivity and things like that. But yeah, in terms of content, yeah, remains.
Yeah, I'm skeptical. I'm
Yeah.
skeptical. I remain to be convinced on that
Yeah.
front.
Okay, well, we have covered so much already, but I'm going to finish up with a final request. So I wondered if you'd mind sharing your 3 top tips for law firms who are looking to improve their digital PR efforts.
Yeah, of course. I guess this is probably just a summary of what I've said previously, but this is just if you're starting out in PR as a law firm, then I think these three will give you the best chance of kind of, a good starting point to get that foundation.
Mhm.
So the first, again, leveraging your in-house experts. Do not underestimate the importance of having those people at the touch of a button, or an email away or a phone call away, because you have just reams of knowledge that you can impart on the general public and on journalists that is useful, and people want to hear from these experts. um the second thing I would say is just repurpose content. If you already have a landing page on a topic, then, and if it's, if people are wanting to discuss that topic, and you think it's kind of interesting, then definitely repurpose that content and use it to craft press releases and reach out to the relevant journalists on
Mhm.
that topic.
Yeah.
um, and then I'm harping on about it, but you always have to be finding an angle or a story and just providing that value. And even business news can be made interesting this way. I think we've managed to do it in the past, where we've had some pretty dry stories to send to the business news or legal news, and we get that coverage by providing the value and speaking to the local press in a way that speaks to them.
Mhm.
So yeah, those would be my 3 tips.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Joanna.
No
It's been
worries.
absolutely fascinating and hopefully really helpful to our listeners, and it's just good to have that expert insight into digital PR. So thank you
No
very much.
worries. Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Conscious Pod. I hope you found it as insightful as I did. There was so much to take away from today's discussion, so please feel free to reach out if you need more expert guidance or tailored strategies for digital PR or any other digital marketing. We're now on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so head over there and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode for more digital marketing insights for law firms.